And I was just so excited to have landed a job there. The fact that this woman from Bryn Mawr who didn't know a stock from a rock got the job that everybody wanted. I just wanted to sit up straight and follow along and make my family proud. It was like I had this lottery ticket and I was afraid to lose it.
Welcome to Book Reporter Talks To, where our interview today will be with our guest, Jamie Fiore Higgins, the author of Bully Market, My Story of Money and Misogyny at Goldman Sachs. How did I find this book? Jesse Kornbluth, who founded Book Reporter with me so many years ago, introduced me to Jamie a few months ago. He had met her in a creative writing class where he taught, and he felt that she was the brightest of the bunch and the best writer. And he said, look, I think you want to meet her, and I think you want to read her book and hear her story. So I read the book in a day. I literally could not put it down. And I've been hearing from so many readers that they feel exactly the same way about the book. Jamie joined us with my book club a couple of weeks ago. And when she did, everybody just said, I just read it nonstop. Whether they were listening on audio or reading a print book, they all could not stop reading. So why are we all having this reaction? While it's a story about Wall Street and money and misogyny, it's a memoir that many women can relate to. Our reviewer, Nora Peel, had this to say about the book. One hopes that readers will not only be stunned and saddened by Jamie Fiore Higgins' individual experience, but will be spurred to action, to examine their own professional situations with clear eyes and a commitment to improve practices in their own industries. And with that intro, welcome, Jamie. So great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So let's start at the beginning. You went to college at Bryn Mawr, you were getting out, and it was time to look for a job, and you were recruited by Goldman. So how did that end up happening?
So it actually happened that I didn't even want to be on Wall Street. I actually wanted to be a social worker, which I can chuckle about now because talk about the polar opposite of Wall Street. But I had had a childhood with a lot of health issues, and I had benefited from the support system of doctors and nurses and physical therapists and social workers. And I really wanted a career that would pay it forward. And in fact, my junior year in college, I took a personality test, and the personality test even said that I would be so good for that kind of career. But my parents had different plans for me, and I don't blame them, but they had grown up in poverty and had really been the American dream, put themselves through school, really pulled themselves out of poverty into the middle class, and had a directive for me and my brother and my sister, which was every generation has to do better. So when I told them that my career goal was social work, they scoffed because they just felt that wasn't going to make enough money to move the family forward. So the directive was clear. The best paying job possible in the best industry. And in 1997, 1998, that was Wall Street. So I went back to senior year, kind of committed to making my family proud and getting a job in that industry. And in fact, my first weekend back at college, senior year, Goldman had put an event on in our alumni house. And I got to go, and I had never been there before unless I was waitressing for well-to-do graduates. So the fact that I was there at this cocktail party, I felt like such an adult. And the woman they brought from Goldman was so impressive, said all the right things. And I left the alumni house that night. I called my mom from my dorm room and I said, I'm not quite sure what Goldman Sachs does, but I think they're on Wall Street and I want to work there. And so I made it my mission starting in August to get a job. And I finally got one the following March.
Wow. So was it a whole interview process along the way? Like what happened to get a job back in those days, which was a while ago?
Yeah.
Very different from now.
Yes, it was 40 interviews over 5 months. So the process started in November of senior year, where you used to drop your resume into a little wooden box. And then there were several days of interviews over December, January, February, and March. 40 of them
Mm.
until I got the job offer, which was to be a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs.
So, financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, did you know about stocks? Did you know were you a math major? Like, what was your major?
Yes, I was a math major, but I went to Bryn Mawr. It's a liberal arts college. So math is math. It's theoretical. There is no economics majors at Bryn Mawr. I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing, except that I knew that everybody wanted a job at Goldman Sachs, and I was committed to be there. And at the time, Goldman was very welcoming. They said, we want all sorts of different math, all sorts of different majors, anthropology, sociology, English, that they would teach you everything you needed to know. So I really went in there not knowing much, but just knowing that it was the job that everyone wanted. And it was definitely going to make my family proud.
Well, I also loved your line. I think you said at some point, I didn't know a stock from a rock. And I just love that because it
I
was.
didn't know a stock from a rock. I mean, literally, I knew nothing.
So when you got there, was there training? Was there, or were you expected to know so much at the beginning? Or was it just an intense, okay, get into the room and figure this out?
Yeah, there was training and they did teach you a lot. But what I found early on was a lot of my new colleagues who also had just graduated college, they already knew a ton about Wall Street. In fact, I'll never forget, I had gotten all these like Wall Street for Dummy books and literally starting from scratch. And a lot of the guys there commented that they'd been managing their own stock portfolio since they were 12. So a lot of them grew up in families that were very familiar with high finance. Either their parents worked there or their uncles or their neighbors. And so although I got the training, I had to work incredibly hard to catch up. And I did, but I had to put in a lot more time than everyone else because they were starting with a certain sense of the markets and also a certain sense of the culture. You know, I kind of walked in never being to a fancy restaurant, you know, wearing a suit from TJ Maxx, and all these people are in custom made suits and are fluent in Broadway shows and country clubs. So it was a steep learning curve, both culturally and also learning about the business.
Right. And remember in the beginning of the book, there was meetings at the beginning that if you weren't there by a certain time, the door closed and that was it. And you were not let in for the day. And you had to go explain to your boss what happened. Tell us about that, because there are these moments back at the beginning that sort of shape what happened later on.
Totally punitive. And it's so ironic because at Bryn Mawr, they have this concept of Bryn Mawr time where, you know, if a class starts at 10, you're kind of given a 5-minute, 7-minute leeway that the professor doesn't really start teaching until 10 after. So at Goldman, training started at 7, and at 7, they locked the doors. So if you were 1 minute behind, you were not allowed in that whole day. And you had to get a signed letter from essentially your boss's boss or your boss's boss's boss. So it was made very clear from the beginning that it was a very structured, rigid environment. And they really wanted you to walk a certain line. And if you were 1 inch off, you were out. And even for those of us who were on the right side of the door, you know, we would be in these big stadium seating rooms, and it would almost be like Price is Right, where people would call out people at random, like, let me talk to, you know, Joe from Harvard. And, you know, Joe, where did the Dow close? And, you know, if Joe didn't get the right answer, he'd be kicked out. And he wouldn't be allowed to come in until the next day. So I had come from this very warm, welcoming environment where, you know, people would figure out problems together. And if you didn't know, that was okay. And we would build on each other. And I went into this world where doors were locked. And if you weren't right, you were out.
Yeah.
So it was a real culture shock.
And it wasn't it wasn't built on community. It was built on getting ahead of the other person the whole time.
That's it.
Did you have any idea? I mean, this is day one, like door closes at 7. Had you talked to anybody who gave you anybody at the company that said, look, this is what's going to be happening? Was there anybody who was guiding you right from the start?
No, because I had no one to guide me. So there was no one in my personal life. There was no uncle or neighbor or friend of the family to talk to about this up there. The fact that this woman from Bryn Mawr who didn't know a stock from a rock got the job that everybody wanted, I just wanted to sit up straight and follow along and make my family proud. It was like I had this lottery ticket and I was afraid to lose it. So no one had prepared me. And although I was shocked about it and a little concerned, my focus on making the most of the opportunity and making my parents proud trumped any feelings of not being sure about what I was getting into.
So you make the cut. It's like if we made the cut. So what is your typical day like? It starts at 7. What are you doing in a typical day? For those who don't know anything that happens on the street, what's typically you're doing all day long in your role as a financial analyst?
So once I start on the desk, you're definitely in before 7. I was usually in around 6. And as an analyst, you always want to be FILO, which is an accounting term for first and last out. So you always want to be the first one in. You never want to walk onto the desk and have your boss say good morning to you. That's not good. It's got to be the other way around. And the same thing when you leave. You always stay until your boss leaves. So I worked in a business that focused on hedge funds and short selling, which is a strategy kind of the opposite of you buy a stock at $10 and you sell it at 80. My clients would sell the stock at 80 and buy it back at 10. So a little bit of a niche product. And I worked with hedge funds and institutions and was kind of a middleman in these short selling trades. But in the morning, you get in, the first one, you are scouring the news, you're trying to figure out kind of where the market's going and what names these hedge funds are going to be interested in. Sometimes the names they're interested in because they've been interested in them for the past several months. Other ones is you wake up and company A is taking over company B, and then all of a sudden that has new market interests for hedge funds to take a position. So all morning you're scouring news, you are trying to figure out what hedge funds want. They're calling you, and then you're talking to your institutions too. And so basically what I did, not to like put everyone to sleep, but I would borrow securities from big institutions and pension plans and lend them to the hedge funds who would then short the securities, sell them short. So for me, I kind of came in with a clean slate every day and tried to kind of make something happen, trying to figure out, well, this person wanted what this person had, and marry the two and take a spread. I did that all day long from, when I walked in to market close. And then after market closes, there's a lot of like cleanup work, trying to figure out what you can anticipate for the next day. Oftentimes talking to our support staff to make sure that everything that I said was going to happen happened. And then it's out with clients.
Wow. So the
with
day
dinner and drinks and stuff. Yeah.
The day doesn't sort of end. It just keeps on going. And if something happens in the middle of the night, it becomes your whole day changes the next day of what 100%. You're coming in to do.
So it's like you're checking your email too, because as you're winding down, Asia's opening. So, you're kind of checking in there, seeing if anything's happening overnight there. And then obviously when you come in, Asia's closing, and then Europe is happening, halfway during the time. So it's kind of a never ending cycle, where you're kind of always anticipating what you have to do next.
Did it change over the course of time that you were there? Because when you first came on board in, what was it, 96, 97, 98, about that time, the internet was new. Trying to find information changed drastically during the time that you were doing this. Did that change a lot of how your day went because you had quicker access to things? And everybody had access to a lot,
Yeah. Yes. I mean, when I started in 98, the internet was kind of up and running. So access to information was pretty strong, but then it just got stronger and stronger over time. And then you had the implications of, Reddit pages and all those kind of like other communications that people had. So to me, more information became available real time for you to have to constantly react to. So I would just say it was more inputs coming at you. Whereas, in the beginning, there wasn't as much going on in the internet. But by the end, it was like you were just constantly scouring, looking for something.
And is the subject line in the newsletter going to be something big? Is something going to be, you have to find these little kernels of information as well, is what I'm even finding in our business today. It's like all day long, things are coming in, and it's not at any point does the information slow down.
Yeah, and on top of it too, not only did you have information coming in, in terms of specific stock names you're reacting to, it's also the environment. And certainly after 2008, with all the legislation about about banks and balance sheets and stuff, there ended up being a lot of extra work we were doing internally to kind of attack the business in a new way based on regulations.
So now I think we've got a little tiny grasp on the money part of the book and what
Yes.
happens. And we're going to talk about the compensation money, which is a whole other part of it later on. But then we've got to talk about misogyny. So did that start happening right? I mean, closing the door is like a pretty rough thing. But where did it really, the misogyny come? Did it start right at the beginning, or did that build over time?
It really started right at the beginning that I noticed it. So now I'm dating myself, but Facebook, before Facebook was Facebook in the late 90s, it was just like hardly existed just on college campuses. But Goldman put out a Facebook, which was a pamphlet. It was basically all the ID pictures of all the new hires at the firm. And Goldman made this really nice book and gave it to all the employees as a way of saying, hey, look at our new class of people. See what schools they go to. See if you have any connections, invite them for coffee, make them feel welcome. And, of course, it was my first lesson in what Goldman Sachs tries to do and then what really happens. So this Facebook, which should have been a tool for increasing communication and camaraderie, the guys on the desk used it as a way to kind of track women based on their appearance, their body shape, chest size, derriere size, leg length. And so I was working on my desk and I would kind of hear all this nonsense. And it really, really shocked me because going back to that event that I went to at Bryn Mawr, there was this woman partner there and she just exuded class. And I thought I was going to enter Goldman where everyone would be drinking their coffees with their pinkies raised because it was such a civilized place. And then I was here and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a locker room.
Yeah.
But what I really just did was I put my head down and I worked. In my family, hard work was everything. And the message from my family was put your head down, get in, go with the company, work hard, and you will be rewarded. So early on, when I started to observe that kind of thing, I call it the white noise of Wall Street because it was just kind of there in the periphery, and I try not to pay it much time.
Yeah. And then so as time goes on, you're part of the group. You make it past that orientation phase and you find out it's really not like this just at the beginning. It's like this. This is the way everybody behaves on an ongoing basis.
That's right.
And we'll talk about okay, so somewhere along the way you get married, you have a child, one child. I think they were twins first. So that makes it even more challenging to be doing this job. And you want to be a mom and you want to be working really hard at what you're doing. And you also run into a roadblock right away with something that you want to do with your children. So what happens there?
So I got pregnant with twins. I had my twins and I really wanted to nurse. I really wanted to breastfeed them. And so I got the pumps and I was all ready. And Goldman had a whole lactation suite devoted to working mothers who wanted to provide breast milk to their kids. So I signed up for it. And a couple of days before my return to work after maternity leave, my boss called me and said, oh, I see you signed up for the lactation rooms. I hear once again, Carol, I'm sure human resources told him because they wanted him to help me and support me, right? But instead the message was, look, you can use them. I'm not saying you can't, but you're going to have to make up the time. And, you're going to be off the desk a bunch pumping, and then you're going to have to stay later to make up the time. And you're not going to see your kids awake all week long. And plus, Jamie, we want to promote you to managing director someday. You have to really be viewed as a serious career person. And we don't think being off the desk breastfeeding really shows that. So after he gave me that talk, he said, so are you going to use the lactation rooms? And I said no, because at that point I felt that, and I wrote this in my book, that I wanted to provide for my daughters. And I felt that Wall Street bonuses did that better than breast milk. And so I, packed up the pump and all the accoutrements, and I stuck them in my basement, and I just started them on a formula.
Yeah. And it was just like, this is, if you want this is what you're going to have to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at that point, was HR at all aware of what was going on? Did anybody say to you, hey, Jamie, you never went to use the lactation room? Hey, did you ever? Nobody reached
No,
back.
nobody. Yeah, no, there was none of that kind of extra oversight and check-in.
Mm-hmm.
So no.
So the days are long. Days are long. You're getting home to try to see the twins at night, but it's the kind of thing where you also have to go out and entertain. You have to go out and do things and be out with people. Then you have your third child. And when he's born, do you once again put out the breastfeeding idea, or just say, not going to go there? Don't even go there.
No,
No.
not even going to go there. No, because at that point, I was really close to making managing director. And I said, you know what, like things seem to be going well. I don't want to do anything to kind of upset matters. I don't want to give them any reason to think that I'm not devoted to working at Goldman Sachs.
And then you realize at that time. So let's talk about like how the money structure works, because there is this thing, and we all have heard about the bonuses, the Wall Street bonuses. And when they come out, it's a boat, it's a yacht, it's a vacation. So
Yeah.
how does the money structure happen? Is it all year, or is it just these bonus times during the year?
So there are salaries, right? But the salaries are, you might have, a smaller scale salary, $100,000, something like that. So when you hear about people making millions and millions of dollars on Wall Street, 80-90% of it is in this year-end bonus. So you work all year long making your salary that gets paid twice a month for 12 months, but then you're waiting for this kind of big windfall at the end of the year. And then not only is the percentage of your total compensation so heavily weighed on the bonus, but also then there are components of that a lot of times there's vesting, where, okay, here's your big chunk of a bonus, a third of it is stock, and you'll see that in 3 years. So it's a structure that kind of always keeps you waiting for that next month to pass or that next year to pass, so you can kind of get more and more and more.
So you get the bonus, you feel really great. And then what happens with your boss the next day? What does he come in and say to you? Let's keep rolling, guys? Or
yeah, so really, the bonus is this kind of congratulatory windfall after a whole year of hard work and sacrifice. And one year, the bonuses hit on over the weekend, and we came into work the next day, and my boss, my partner, handed us all a banana. Had a basket, handed us all a banana, and said, "You're all monkeys in my book, and I can replace you at any second. There's a line out the door of people who will take your job. So every day you have to do better than the day before. You are taking up real estate in my house, and you need to prove that you're worthy to take up the real estate." So it was this crazy dichotomy. It was an abusive relationship where you're kind of treated really well and congratulated with all these goodies. And then as soon as that happens to you, smashed down again and you're told that you're worthless and worth nothing without Goldman and their name and their role.
Wow. I personally found you went on to have another child, get fourth child. Yes. And you're coming back from that maternity leave. And this is the one that got me the most, is you were sent on a town on business the week you came back. Like you stop in to say, hi, everybody. And it's like Monday, you're going to Miami. So was that typical of what would happen?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it was typical. I also feel like I had burned some bridges at Goldman, because after years of kind of looking the other way at bad behavior, I had gone to HR and reported something. And my boss never forgave me for that. So I went on maternity leave for my fourth child. And I actually got a pamphlet in the mail that they would always send, a couple weeks before you return. And it even said, the first month that you're back, no travel, no dinners. We want you to kind of get slowly acclimated to your new schedule. And I said to myself, you know what? this time around, the rules are going to apply to me. And then my boss called me and said, oh yeah, by the way, your first day back, you're heading to Miami for a week. And so at that point, Carol, I knew I was going to be leaving. And so I really was just there for that last bonus. And then I knew I was going to walk away.
Right.
So I didn't want to upset the apple cart. I just went.
And at no point, like, does HR reach out and say, oh, Jamie's in Miami. She's not here for her first day back. Jamie's doing dinners. That's not what we want. Or are they that divorced from what's going on the floor?
They're that divorced. There's like no oversight. There's pamphlets. There are great talking points. There are chapters in employee handbooks, but yet they don't materialize. And there is nothing there is no checks and balances to say, hey, wait a second. Why is this woman being booked on a trip to Miami? She just got back.
And it's interesting because right now, New York State, New York City especially, has this training that you have to do, this ridiculous training courses you have to go and do for an hour. And they have the most obvious ways that people are misbehaving in the office. And you have to watch this video and then check off, like, oh, did they do something bad or whatever? And just feel like, did any of these people ever watch these things to actually see what was going on? Because it seems like they could just write scenarios there and it could be exactly what you had to be talking about. It wasn't that far from the truth of what was going on all day. So was there things like anti-harassment training or anything going on while you were there?
Oh my gosh, 100%. But again, it was like this disconnect between what they claim they wanted and what really happened. In fact, I signed up to be an LGBTQ plus ally. And I went to special training for that. And I had a table tent on my desk to kind of showcase my involvement. And the guys in the desk would hide it on me, stick it on its side, stick it in the drawer, throw it in the garbage. And then when we would all go to these mandatory trainings, they would be, mocking the population that we were being trained to, respect and be inclusive towards. So it's just, again, this, so although I think these trainings are a start, I think they're a bit futile unless there's really oversight in terms of what's really happening in the day-to-day.
Yeah, you have to actually be a boss who cares about that, or just cares about money,
That's right.
So by some point, by your own admission, you became a bully as well. Like you just caught up. And I think it was getting caught up in the way the whole culture was of this is what you do. And tell us about that, because I know that we're going through the book, you weren't proud of those moments.
Yeah. I was a bully in a couple ways, but I'll never forget, going back to that training program we had talked about where the door was locked and people were kicked out. At one point in my career, I was asked to run the program. And I shocked myself how I used the same tactics of locking the door, of shaming people when they had the wrong answer, of kicking them out. One of the interns, I mocked for the color of her nail polish.
Wow.
Because I was so ingrained at that point that like assimilation was the way to go, that I think on some level, I thought I was doing it for their own good. Like, how else are they going to know how tough it is here unless we teach it from the start? If we're all loosey-goosey and too welcoming and not locked doors, well, they're going to be in for a culture shock when they hit the desk. So there's part of me that thought I was doing it for their own good. There was also part of me, Carol, that it felt good to be like in the power seat for a change after all those years of feeling like I was, I was the person who, was treated that way. It was kind of nice to flip the switch, and kind of be on the right side of the equation for once. And then also too, I feel like I was kind of a bully by my silence. So, a lot of women would come to me over the years with complaints of harassment, intimidation, gender discrimination. And I would always listen. I would actually put on my old social worker hat and try to be that helper and healer. But then when the time came and push came to shove, and I would go to bat for these women with my boss, the directive was clear. It was like, listen, she's a drama queen. And if you help her, it's going to hurt you. So, who you're going to choose.
Mm-hmm.
And that obligation I felt toward my family of origin, the family I was building with my husband, time and time again, I didn't fight for them.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be their job security, whether it be their compensation, or whether it be advocating for them when they were dealing with some toxic stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
never had the strength to see it through because I was just too worried about getting punished myself.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard from any of those people since the book came out? Have you heard from any people have you heard from people you've worked with, but specifically women?
Yes. So I have heard from several of the women I used to work with. Some reminded me about how I didn't help them,
Mm-hmm.
which, I owned in the book. And, some have thanked me because they feel that my kind of exploration of my experience has
Mm-hmm.
helped reframe their own experiences. So for one woman, she said, I'll never forget, I complained about something. 6 months later, my review went down. 6 months after that, I was let go. And I've always been so confused about what happened and how I gave up this opportunity of a lifetime. Because again, Goldman really makes you feel like this is the only game in town. And that by hearing my story, she realizes that she was almost just a pawn in a game, and it really had nothing to do with her. Yeah.
But it's always interesting when you're in a place like that where it's any second something could go wrong and you'll take the blame and you're going to, and it's such a toxic way to live. I know that we've had conversations about if you make a mistake, like we've seen people make mistakes over the last couple of weeks, and it's like you would just be, oh my gosh, I'm going to be up all night, all weekend. I'm going to be in trouble. That thing of being an adult and saying, I'm going to get in trouble when I go to the office on Monday. And that mindset of, no, I'm not going to be thinking about great other things. I'm terrified of what's going to happen when I get there.
Oh my gosh, Carol, that was my life. That
Mm-hmm.
was my life. I mean, making one mistake, one typo in an email, and just my body would go cold that, I would just be shredded by my boss. And remember too, going back to the compensation all year long, you're knowing that they're, computing what they're going to pay you. So, and like literally, if you would make a mistake, the boss would be like, that's going to cost you money. Up,
Wow.
just costed you money. And you're just like, oh, so they know they have this over you, and they're constantly reminding you that every misstep along the way could cost you money. And at the end of the day, that's the reason why I was there, to support my family. So
Mm-hmm.
it was just so debilitating.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that kind of behavior drives you in the wrong direction. What
Mm.
made you realize you were on the wrong path? Was there one wake up moment, or were there a whole series of them along the way that said, I can't be doing this anymore? I mean, this is just not going to work.
There were a lot of things along the way that I realized were not healthy that I was doing, but then kind of like the one wake up moment, there was just definitely one. But my first kind of misstep was my reliance on Xanax.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to feeling that kind of constant panic, I would be at work, I'd be shaking, that I would literally just take Xanax as I needed it, just to kind of become more equilibrium.
Mm.
Then the drinking at night, just kind of always an escape. And then my worst mistake was I started having a relationship with one of the senior guys in my department.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so unlike me. In fact, when I first started at Goldman, they called me Sister Jamie because I was so innocent.
Mm-hmm.
I was just raised by these ironclad values with my family, but I was so strung out. I was a constant stress. I had 3 little ones at home. My husband had become the primary caregiver. He was miserable. I felt like I was trying hard at everything and failing at everything. And here's this senior guy who would, say to me after a long day, let me take you out for a glass of wine and like hear what's going on. And he was actually helpful to me. He wanted me to do well. And he ended up just being a really good friend. And then it kind of morphed into something more. And one night I was out with him at his apartment, and my 5-year-old daughter called me with a stomach ache.
Mm.
And that was kind of my wake up call to say, what am I really doing with my life? So don't get me wrong. Before that, I knew I was making these bad choices along the way, but that was kind of that mic drop moment to say, this is not who I want to be. I feel like I had done a complete 180 from who I had started with to who I was at that moment. And I knew it was time to kind of return back.
That's what you're doing. Yeah. So one of these things that you did was you created this spreadsheet. And I love the spreadsheet where you're
Yes.
jotting down, let's talk about the spreadsheet and what it was going to
Yes.
give you, spreadsheet to freedom.
The spreadsheet of freedom. So I really wanted to kind of focus on my next chapter, my chapter away from Goldman. I knew Goldman was so unhealthy for me, unhealthy for my marriage, that I wanted to make a plan. And so there was kind of a financial component, there was a career component, kind of all the steps I needed to do that I would feel comfortable to walk away, because I was at Goldman for so long, and Goldman Sachs is so good at making you feel you're nothing without them. I mean, one of the mantras constantly is you can only leave Goldman once. Like, you only have one shot at this brass ring, so you better not screw it up. So this was my way of getting my financial life in order, my work life in order, so I could feel like, you know what, Jamie, you can leave, take a sabbatical, and reinvent yourself. And so I started working on it. And then once my daughter called me that night and I really realized that I needed to leave, I sat down with my husband. Luckily, we repaired our marriage and we made our exit plan. And I couldn't quit cold turkey. It's not like I could have left Goldman the next day, but I put a date on it and I set a goal and I worked toward it.
And okay, so the last check hits, it hits your bank account. You know you're going to go in and resign. At any moment when that number came in, you sit there and go, one more year, what would it mean? Could I do it?
Yeah, no, I couldn't at that point. I really, really couldn't. I mean, I still can't believe I left Goldman Sachs after all those years. But you know, I finally realized like the paycheck wasn't worth the pain that I was enduring, and no amount of money was worth it. And the irony was I made really good money at Goldman, but I never really had these materialistic interests. I mean, I still wore suits from TJ Maxx up until my last day. I was, and you know, no disrespect to anyone who loves the labels, it's just not my thing. For me, money was always about security, having a safe place for your family to live, food in the fridge, a good education. And then on top of that, Carol, I also saw what money did to other people there, like the people who were so obsessed with money and the status that money can buy, that they couldn't leave because they were just like prostrate to the altar of the almighty dollar and Goldman Sachs. So I never wanted to be in that position ever.
I remember people saying that the third child was a symbol to a guy, like it was like having a great watch, because you could afford to have 3 children in the city or 4 children in the city, and you were able to do this. And it was very, very interesting to think about. That's how life was measured, by what you could afford to do. But often it was, you always had to keep up, and you were not in that keeping up game. You weren't on that side of it, which I think is the reason you could walk away. Either that, or it would be, we have to downsize our house, our life, and you'll never see Vail again. That's it, kids. You're never going skiing again. Yeah. That's it. That's what we've decided.
But you know what, still, I mean, people to this day I know are still stuck there because they're living these country club lives with 3 vacation homes and, you know, private school and all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with having those things and enjoying those things. My big question is, what does it cost you to earn all that, to, you know, to have all those things?
Yeah, I had a friend whose husband worked on the desk, and she says, I can't even call during the day. Like, I cannot call just to say, hi, what do you want for dinner? Not going to happen. I have to wait till the end of the day to have any kind of a conversation like that. And that was really interesting to me, because I couldn't picture that somebody was in a job like, yeah, okay, if you're doing surgery, flying a plane, I get it. But not when you're sitting there that you would never be able to choose. No, I can't call them. I can't figure out what we're going to do this weekend. Not going to happen. And I also know a lot of people who walk away like you do around 40. And
Mm.
I couldn't understand that. Years ago, one of my very good friends, when we belonged to a swim club, he took off and just said, that's it at 40. And I couldn't understand how A, he could afford it. Now I get it. And B, why he could do that. And he says, I was in such a bad state. I was so mentally in a bad state, which was really, really interesting for me to hear, because when reading your book, I was reflecting back and literally I heard that like 15 years ago from him. And he
Mm.
says, you just don't understand. It's just not worth it anymore.
It's
And I
just
said,
not worth it.
so
It's just not worth it.
so then you leave and you wake up the next morning and you don't have to be anywhere at 7. And what happens?
Oh my gosh. So I leave, and my husband had, taken a step back from his career. So he then had to take a step into his career. So he had all these meetings planned that first Monday, and the stomach flu hit my house. So I had 4 kids, and they were all 7 and under at the time. An infant, a 4-year-old, 2 7-year-olds. And it was miserable. I mean, it was really, really gross. And it really, after a week of that, I really said to myself, what have I done? Like, what have I traded my life into? Those first few months, I mean, that was the kickoff, but those first few months, I was really depressed because I really began to see how much I identified with being a managing director at Goldman Sachs. Even though I never really bragged about it, I never really told about, I knew that was kind of what that identity is, what made me feel worthwhile in this world. And without it, I felt incredibly lost. So it took a long time to kind of build myself back up again and, realize how much of my skill set really came from me, not from them.
I worked at Condé Nast for a very long time, and I left when I had my second child. And there's more tumult. Like, we're going to remake the magazine again. And I decided I'd done it 5 times and that was enough. But I sat home and I realized how much my identity was tied, exactly like what you're saying, to what you were doing. But then I started this internet company. It was really interesting because people actually said to me, like, I go out and see people in restaurants because I was having meetings, and they go, oh, we're so sorry that you're not there anymore. And I was just there like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I actually sat up in my office, I have an office here, and just sat there in the morning, like trying to figure out what to be. And actually, that was my last free summer. I really should have gone, just sat by the pool. I should have sat in the pool. I should have done all these things. But when you've been in that kind of a structure for so long, and you have a title and you have people reporting to you and all that stuff, when all that gets pulled away, you sort of sit there and go, now what's next? What's my next act? And it's really, really strange. So you originally said you're going to write a book, and it was going to be a book of fiction. And at what time did you decide to write it as a memoir? How did that end up happening?
Really right before. I said it was a work of fiction. It was all true. I just changed the name of Goldman Sachs to something else. It's not like I had actually fictionalized it or changed anything. I think I was just afraid. And then I said to myself, what am I really afraid of? The kind of my dirty secrets of, my infidelity and maybe the money I made. But other than that, my husband forgave me. My parents still love me. All my friends read it and supported me. So I'm like, what am I doing changing the name of Goldman to something else? Like, why not I just own it? All you have to do is Google my name. You knew I worked at Goldman Sachs. Yeah, so it was actually a really big moment. It was around the time I had a couple personal essays published, and it was the first time I had ever put my work out there. Some of them were really kind of personal things, and I realized they were out there in the world, and you're so afraid as a writer to put yourself out in the world. And I put them out in the world, and then I realized nothing catastrophic happened. I wasn't sucked down into the center of the earth. I wasn't, everyone still loved me. So I'm like, why am I hiding behind this silly veneer? Why don't I just be honest? And I'm so glad I did, Carol, because I feel like really calling it out there, I think it really, I feel like it's a bold move, but I feel like people have appreciated that kind of generosity of authenticity and have returned it to me by sharing with me their stories.
Right, right, right. This is what happened to me. This is what I felt. And it's coming up with so many people writing you. I know we've been talking about that. Did you have notes to back up all your memories? Like that, oh, this is what happened this year. Like my diary of distress, I would actually call, I want to say diary at some point, my diary of distress, you know?
Yes, totally. I had, I kept journals and I actually kept a Word document, and it was mostly just date, time. It was not like, dear diary, this is what happened today.
Right.
It was more like, this was the date, this is what happened, this is what I felt. And on all the big stuff I knew, like all the big stuff I remembered, you know, because they were such big things. But between my Word document, my journals, my therapist, my husband, my mother, my best friend, it's like, all the stories, all the big stories were not only up here, but written down and also had been consumed by other people at the time. And so then they shared their memories with me as well.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, here we go. Here we go. Do you think that finance has to be as ruthless as it is? Do you think that there's something about these split-second decisions that you've got to be making? If you err, it's going to cost this many dollars. Does it have to be like that?
I think when it actually comes to the business, yeah. I mean, listen, Goldman is excellent at so many things, at pushing the envelope and really kind of like, never once in my experience at Goldman did I see anything illegal. But did I see really smart minds trying to leverage and take advantage of every last opportunity and squeeze every last drop of juice out of a lemon of a situation? Absolutely. So that kind of focus, that attention to detail, that high standard for performance, I think is absolutely necessary. I do not think, though, that that has to trickle down into the sports teams you like and, you know, the type of scotch you drink and whether or not a woman wants to go off the desk to breastfeed, because you better believe the guys went off the desk to get their shoe shines polished, and that was okay. So do I think that kind of ruthless, high energy, high stakes culture, yeah, that a lot of that needs to stay the same. I don't think, though, it needs to bleed into the personnel, and I think you can totally do it without commenting on women's breast sizes.
Yeah, that kind of do. So you've gotten a lot of attention from the financial media, a lot.
Yeah.
You go out to our website and see there's a ton of pieces out there. But on today's show, you've been on Dr. Phil, you've done like all these kinds of appearances. Why do you think this story is resonating so much with people and you're getting this kind of attention? Besides the fact that, oh, this is a story of what happened really at Goldman Sachs. Are people ready to wake up, do you feel, or they're being charged to wake up?
I think, I mean, I have heard from hundreds of people, both from Wall Street, men and women, both from Wall Street, medicine, media, law, and beyond. I think that a lot of the themes of my book resonate with a lot of people. Yes, I specifically talk about Wall Street. That doesn't necessarily, resonate with everyone, but certainly the sacrifices we make in the name of our careers, how we're so tied, how our identity is so tied to what we do for money, I think really resonates. The sacrifices we make as people for the almighty dollar, all those kind of themes resonate. I do think that we're ironically in this really interesting place because it's kind of post Me Too, it's post all these social justice movements and post this pandemic, which I think has really forced people to really think about what kind of work life they want and how they want to fit that in to their other, living life, everything but work. Yeah. So I think people are ready to really have tough conversations. And I think, even with this whole concept of quiet quitting, I think employees are really interested in kind of setting up more boundaries and having more autonomy when it comes to their careers.
And especially it's the Gen Z generation of, I don't want to go back to work 5 days a week in the office. I don't want to do this. And they're setting up their own boundaries of what they want to do. You know, when I was working at the Mademoiselle, and it was a couple of decades ago, the Gen X was the first kids who were parents of divorce. They were the first generation that came home and watched the Brady Bunch, but their families didn't look like that. The first generation that was really a lot of working parents, and their parents and their grandparents may have gone back to work as well. And as a result, they became different people of what they would expect, what they would take. And I'm trying to picture, is it for the almighty dollar that they would actually stand in that room right now? Like, that room didn't close at 7 o'clock the whole time during the pandemic because no one was in the office. And now all of a sudden it's like, go in, the door is going to close, and this is what's going to happen. When you were on Zoom or whatever, you're talking to your boss, not quite the same thing. Not quite.
Yeah. I do think that it's interesting what you say about parents, because I think that has so much to do with people's approach to working. Like for me, my parents are in their 80s. So they were very much of the generation where you get and go with a company, you work there for life, you put in your 40 years, you get your gold watch, your pension, whatever. I even saw some of the millennials that started working for me, because I'm Gen X. Some of the, I think about that for some of the millennials who came in, a lot of their parents had lost their jobs during the 2008 crisis. So their parents are more advising them to say, you know what, like, you have to worry about yourself. So that even started a bit of a shift. That even started a bit of a shift. And so I think there's going to be a shift still. And that's why I think companies really have to realize that, you know, Goldman Sachs, I think it's their second or third business principle, that their most important asset is their people. So I think they really need to, as well as other big organizations, to really kind of listen to a little bit of what their people want. Maybe not give them everything they want, but at least listen and acknowledge that they have a voice and have some influence on what's going to happen in the future.
And it can't just be this power play that's going on all day long. That's what I feel like. People come in and it's a power play right from the beginning. And as a result, you're working for the power play. You're not necessarily working bettering yourself or whatever. It's all about power. It's all about how you get more power and what you do to do there. And a lot of people have been seeing right now, they would much rather have balance than power. It's it's really, really different.
That's right. And I feel like a lot of the people I hear from, like, I've been, you know, hopping on Zooms with people here and there, you know, they ask to talk to me about their careers and stuff. So many people say they're stuck. I'm stuck, Jamie, I'm stuck. And so I really challenge them, you know, while I was writing my book, I also got trained as a coach and really kind of challenging the mindset of being stuck. And that, you know, a lot of times you can kind of stick yourself by doing kind of one small thing toward your goal. And so to me, I try to empower these people to say, okay, well, what's one small thing you can do to kind of change the perspective? And a lot of times, just making that one action shows them that they have some agency and autonomy, and that they do have the power to change their environment, and that they do have options. And sometimes, Carol, knowing that you have the option to leave makes it okay to stay.
Exactly.
Because then it becomes your choice. You're no longer stuck.
You know, I know you've talked to a bunch of book groups already, including mine, where we talked for about 2 hours.
Yes.
I joke that this is how I can see it was a really good book group meeting. I had 6 bottles of wine left at the end of the night. No one had eaten the cheese and crackers, and the brownies were only eaten because they were passed around. If they weren't passed around, they would have been sitting in just one place. And it was the first time that we all loved the book. And I'm the old person in the group. Everybody else is in their 40s. And they're in that moment of, my kids are X age at this point. Do I want to be doing this anymore? What am I doing? And even if it's staying home, you know, a lot of moms stay home and when their children are born and they said they're going to go back. And I look at some of them and I'm like, you never went back. Like, what was the thing that held you back on going back? Is it the world changed too much? Was it your own insecurity? It's all these things that happen to women. It's not just being on Wall Street. We have this own mindset of you can't do this. You're not able to do it. And I think
That's
fighting that is a big deal. Men assume that they're going to continue to work longer times, longer periods. For women, those exits to have children, 1, 2, 3, whatever you're going to do, gives you that moment to sit there and say, wait a second, what am I doing? Am I really going to go back in 3 months? Am I going to go back in 6 weeks? What's going to happen?
And,
So,
yeah. And also too, I feel, women too, even some of the women, who are stay-at-home moms resonate because they're losing their identity in their role, right? Even though they're not paid for their main role as mother, that's their main job. And so they even said, you know what, like your book made me really think about how much I identify of just being a mom. What's going to happen when the youngest one goes off to college?
yeah. It's like, this is where I'm going to be. If people want to discuss your book with you, can they just reach out to you on your website? What do people do if they want to get in touch with you about that?
Yes, my fabulous website designer has a whole book club section. So if you'd like me to be part of book club discussions, I would love to be. I've done, I think, like dozens now. I mean, the book's only been out like not even 2 months and a week or something. And I've been doing 2 book clubs a week since like the 3rd week it's been out. So yeah, I love it. If you're, close to me, I stop by, I go to strangers' houses, I bring a gift. And for those on Zoom, I've done them in Texas, I've done them in California, I've done them in Georgia. So yeah, I just love talking and hearing how the different parts of my story resonate with others. I feel like our stories are more similar than different. So yeah, so it's really nice
with
to hear
you.
how it resonates.
Oh, and true confession here, folks. Our authors on the web division built Jamie Fiore Higgins' website. So I feel like I need to acknowledge that at this point. So I've had a lot of conversation with her about this book. And I remember I said, I think you need to write a discussion guide. And Jamie, in her true style, went out and wrote a discussion guide that I lightly edited that's up there on the site. And it was something that she didn't know how to write a discussion guide. She just said, well, what would I think that people would want to discuss? So, there's that new skill that you learned that you just didn't know.
Yes.
So was the title always Bully Market? My Story of Money, Misogyny at Goldman Sachs?
Yes. My mom and I came up with it. And I just assumed it was going to be changed, because I feel like that they often are, right?
Right, often.
But we were trying to kind of figure out kind of a play on Wall Street, and obviously everyone loves bull markets, but how it really was, if there was kind of one consistent strategy, way of existence at that place, it was really a market for that kind of bullying behavior, that power play. So I was psyched when Simon & Schuster decided to keep it.
And what I really loved is I have no knowledge of the market whatsoever, except for things that I've learned watching Industry on HBO. Like that's some of my knowledge, folks. And I'm always lost like halfway through, the episode on the money parts of things. But when I was reading this, it's very readable. This reads more like, is this a novel? Oh, whoa, this is a memoir. This actually happened to this person as you turn the pages. So looking at the cover, is this the first one you saw, or is this one that they came up with along the way?
It was pretty much the first one. There might have been some like iterations with color. But no, that was pretty much true to the first mock-up.
Yeah, I forget to figure out if it's blood. It can't be a grain cover. It's got to be blood. It's like blood money.
Yeah.
And I like the bull silhouette, but I confess I did not see at the beginning. And then I really looked and I was like, oh, this is so perfect. And the big bull and the little woman, what I mean?
Yes.
You also narrate the audiobook, which I understand was your first time as a narrator. What was that experience like, and why did you choose that you were going to have to do this?
I was excited it was an option. And some people had said, oh, you really should get someone to narrate it for you. I was a little bit self-conscious of my New Jersey accent. But I felt really strongly that I had the guts to write the words. I should speak the words myself. I was so glad I did, because having written a book and you spend so much time editing is such a kind of piecemeal process that it was really nice to read it from start to finish. Like I just read my book over a couple of days, and it was really nice for me to kind of live it again, without a, editor's eye to kind of try to, work on certain segments. But I've heard that people have enjoyed the fact that I read it myself. So I thought it was a good decision overall. And it was fun. It was a fun experience.
Yeah, people are talking, a lot of people are listening to audio right now. The numbers are through the roof. In fact, I was away this weekend, and part of what I did was I was at the Savannah, no, I'm sorry, this Charleston Literary Festival. And what we felt is like we were walking towards to buy the books. My friend who was with me said, I really don't want a print book. I really want to either listen or I want the ebook, because I don't collect books at my house. And this is what I want to do. And I've been talking to people at book festivals that has to be an option that they're able to either monetize a portion of, or pay attention that actually did sell a lot of books, because you could just stand in the lobby and order it or reserve it at your library or do whatever you're doing, just being there. And it's very, very different than what it was before, whereas could you go sign my book was a really big deal. Now people are saying, I don't need to sign my book. I just need the audio or the ebook. This is what I want to do.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I can picture
definitely.
people saying that. So what's next? You've written this, you're doing some book clubs. What's next for you? And what do you want to do next? What on the same topic?
So I really want to continue to shine a light on this topic. And so any opportunity I can to talk to organizations, to talk to corporations about, yes, of course I had my experience, and I hope people will pick up the book and read it and hopefully see a little bit of themselves in it, but really want to try to move forth change. And I think the change happens in two ways. I think it's getting corporations on board to kind of put the money where their mouth is, to kind of get those great talking points and have them actually happen. Some more metrics around DEI, real metrics that they can manage to. And also through my work as a coach, I want to continue working with employees and battling the stuckness problem, empowering people to have second acts. Look at me, I left a Wall Street person. Look at me. 5 years later, I wrote a book and I'm talking to you. So really showing people in midlife, especially women, that there is not an expiration date for opportunity. We can continue to grow and evolve as we age, and also help the young people in this country. I feel like so much time and energy is spent on getting our kids educated and off to college. Not as much time is spent on getting them ready for the workforce. And so, I'd love to almost bully proof the young Jamies of today. So, they are more prepared for some toxic work environment to know what they can do about it. And I think in all the work I'm trying to do with people, it's just to remind them that they're in charge. They have autonomy, they have agency, they can make a change. So anything that helps further those topics, I am in for.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because right now big pushes are for women to have longer maternity leaves and this kind of stuff. And I keep saying, folks, you're focusing on the first 3 months. And what you really want to focus on, being able to go to the softball game, you want to be able to go to kindergarten, you want to be able to go to the Halloween contest without guilt. And if you're not doing that, well, you know what? You're focusing on 12 weeks of your child's life, and you're not really thinking about the whole end game of what goes on.
Well, it's similar to, we hire 50% women, but no one's asking what happens to them 10 years down the road, right? It's like everyone's focused on that kind of first iteration of it and not building a pipeline. To your point, great that you have maternity leave, but is there support that you can continue to be an active parent as you get into the organization? Great, you're bringing diversity in the door. How can we get them to stay so then eventually they're in roles that where you really make a meaningful contribution to the company and change the culture?
I have to say, just starting to wrap up, Goldman has definitely issued a statement that these things did not happen in the workplace. They do not have these chronicled or whatever. And I just need to say that they came out and said that this statement, but at the same time, it's happened at so many other companies that it's not just their story. And this is what you bring up with your fictitious names and, massaging situations and stuff like that. I think that so many people are saying, that's my world too. This is what
Mhm.
I did all day
Yep,
long. And you
yep.
think it's so much fun and it's really not.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I really tried to write the book in a responsible and respectful manner. I didn't want to shame any one individual. Um, and yeah, Goldman has issued its one statement that they, have reissued time and time again. And I totally respect it, but I have to say, Carol, after, talking about being up all night after I got in trouble with the Goldman gods, it feels so good now just to tell the truth and not be afraid of them anymore. So it's a good place to be after all
It's a
these
really
years.
good place to be. And this is a really good place to wrap this interview
Yeah.
up. I look so much forward to seeing what you do next, whether it's speaking or how you're going to communicate this message further, because the reaction from people reading it, this business of I read it in 24 hours, I couldn't put it down. That's something to say about a book, but it's also something to say about how people are relating to it. I get it. I totally get what's happening
Mm.
here. And I still can't figure out a difference between a stock and a rock. So don't think that's what you're getting in this book, folks. This is not high math. This is
No,
high thinking about yourself and how you feel. Jamie, thanks so much for joining us. I so appreciate it.
thank you for having me.
And to our viewers and our listeners, look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To. Remember, you can subscribe so you can always find us whenever our new episode airs, either on the podcast or on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody.